Good morning. Let me extend my welcome to worship this morning. My name's Adam Hildebrand. I get to be one of the pastors here at LVfirst. It's such a joy to be with all of you on this long weekend. Glad that you decided to join us, whether you're joining us here in person or you're joining us online. We're just excited to celebrate together, to have some time together, to worship together, and just to think about what God is doing in our lives and in this church and through this church in the community. And so thank you for your presence, and thank you for all the different ways that you're involved in this church and in this community. Just real quick, sorry about moving the men's breakfast around, but if there's a chance of snow on Tuesday, so I know if there's a chance of snow on Tuesday, everybody's already we're out on Wednesday. We're out. So as a Floridian, I'm just acknowledging the fact that it snowed once already and I'm done. I'm good. That was my snow for the year. I don't need another one. But the fact that there's even the chance of that, we'll just move it to the 29th and everybody will be happier. It'll work out better. But guys, we'd love to see you on the 29th. We're going to spend 10 weeks talking through these 10 ideas that are found in the book of Titus. And you're going to be with me, and we're going to just have a good time together, good conversation together. And so would encourage you to put that on your calendar, be a part of it. Drop in once, drop in 2 times, drop in 10 times. But we want to get guys together, think that's important. And then Parents First Initiative, it is incredible to see the way that this has grown in our community, and we need your help. We especially, some of our classes this year have a lot of, I know this seems just duh, we've got a bunch of parents, and those parents have kids. And so while we're teaching the parents, we need somebody to hang out with their kids. And so Sunday night, Tuesday during the day especially, so if you got time during the day from 11 to 1, and then Thursday evening, we could use some help wrangling some kids and building relationships with them. And it's what an amazing ministry opportunity for us to invest in the lives of the next generation by just spending some time with them, listening to them, and playing Legos with them. I mean, that's fantastic. So would encourage you to talk to Adam after service if you got some space or time in your week where you can serve. But I know you're serving so many ways, and if you're new with us this morning, hope you're getting a little glimpse of who we are and what we're all about. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been walking together through Luke chapter 15, this famous story of the prodigal son, which we found out is not just the only prodigal in the story, because we talked about the fact that prodigal really means lavish or excessive. And so we've got a younger son who's really lavish and excessive in the way he goes off to live. He is prodigal in his own way. We've got this older son who we're going to talk about today, who's lavish and excessive in his own self-righteousness. And then we've got this father who is lavish and excessive in the way that he loves and shows grace to both sons. And both of these stories are in the context of lost things. Have you ever lost anything? Yeah, we've all lost things. You lost your car keys, you lost your wallet, you lost that sticky note with all of the things that you needed to know that you needed to do this week when you wrote them down on a sticky note and then put it somewhere. But maybe on the sticky note you should have put, remember where the sticky note is. And you can't find that thing, and in your frantic nature and your hurriedness and in your unsettledness, you're looking around and you're like, where is that sticky note that had all of the things that I had to do today on it? And then somebody in your family is like, it's right there. It's right in front of your face. You ever had that experience where you've lost something in plain sight? Where it's just right there in front of you, but you didn't see it. You looked everywhere for it, and it was right there the whole time. Psychologists actually have a term for this. It's called inattentional blindness or perceptual blindness. And it occurs when an individual fails to perceive an unexpected stimulus in plain sight, purely as a result of a lack of attention rather than any vision defects or deficits. Man, that happens to me all the time. I fail to perceive things a lot. This isn't just something that happens in relationship to something that we've lost, but it also happens in all sorts of different areas, in our relationships especially. You didn't realize that person had feelings for you, you just didn't notice, or you didn't notice that your kid was having a hard time because they didn't just say, hey, I'm having a hard time, and you didn't realize because you're hurried and you're doing all these other things, and you didn't kind of notice their body language. You didn't realize that your spouse was giving you that look, like the look that said you did something that you ought not to have done, and you just didn't notice because you were thinking about something else, you were focused on something else, and you said something that you shouldn't have said, and now you're getting a look, but your inattentional blindness is not allowing you to perceive that thing that's happening, and you missed it. It was lost in plain sight. And sometimes we ourselves can get lost in plain sight. We don't notice things about ourselves. We don't notice things that we do. We don't notice things because we're so wrapped up in everything that's going on, and we're so wrapped up in the things that we have to do and we have to get done that we sometimes miss what's happening around us. And things get lost. Last couple of weeks, we've been talking about this new year and this new opportunity for us to find some of those things that we may have lost in our world and in our life. You know, the new year gives us a great opportunity to find some new things, to say, this is what I've lost, and this is what I'd like to find in the new year. I'd like to do this, I'd like to do that. And Jesus tells 3 parables in Luke 15 about lost things that become found things. Back to back to back stories. You know, the first story is about, one coin that gets lost. One sheep that gets lost. And the second story is about one coin that gets lost. And the third story is about one son that gets lost, right? Or is it? There might be more to this story than I think sometimes we allow ourselves to see. There are some things this year that we all need to find in our lives. And I told you the last couple of weeks here at LVfirst, there's some hopes that we have for you in this new year. Some things that you might find, that you might find your place in the Father's house. That you might find a place where you're always welcome home. You might find your people that you can live life with, that you can celebrate with, that you can be encouraged by. That we would find our purpose together. They would sense what it is that God is inviting all of us to be a part of. And last week we spent some time talking about that younger brother, you know, the prodigal son, the one that we label these people in our families with, and we assume that they're like that and that that's the only prodigal, but we know that it's not the only prodigal, that there's, prodigal is all throughout this story. Prodigal means lavish or excessive, and the younger brother is lavish and excessive. The older brother is lavish and excessive. The father is lavish and excessive. They're all prodigal in this story. Last week we talked about that younger son who took all of his dad's money that he gave to him, and he went off to a far distant land, and he squandered it all. He found himself in struggle, and he was desperate, and he should have desperately wanted to be in the Father's house. And we found out that even if we're in the distant land, even if it's not all that distant in reality, even if it's pretty close to where we live, even if we bump into that distant land each and every day, we're always welcome to find our place in the Father's embrace. And for the most part, when we read this story, when we talk about the story of the prodigal son, when we talk about Luke 15, the story in our minds ends there. It's the son goes away, the son comes back, the father embraces him, we're like, yay! Good, it's got a nice little bow on it. The story ends nice and neatly. We think, yes, that's good for all those people who struggle with that thing, who find themselves in the distant land. But Jesus doesn't stop the story there. Jesus doesn't end with that. He goes on, he says in verse 27 of Luke 15, now his elder son, that's the father's elder son, was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called to one of the slaves, and he asked, what was going on? What is going on? You know, the older son, he's just been doing his thing. He's been working. He's been doing what the dad asked him to do. He's been out in the field working all by himself, making sure it happens. He didn't squander his money. He didn't go off to a far off land. But there's something really interesting that I noticed as I read this story in preparation for this. That the way Jesus tells the story, the older son comes home all alone. He's all by himself. Like he's been working out in the fields, and it doesn't say that, and the elder son came back with all of his friends, and the father met them there, and they're having a big party. He has to call to a slave who's up by the house and go, hey, come here real quick. What is going on? Oh, well, everybody else is at the party, except for you, because you've been out in the field all by yourself, working all the time by yourself, trying to prove something to yourself and to everybody else. He's all by himself. I imagine him walking up, as I picture it, like perfectly chiseled jawline, nice beard, muscular but not bulky. This guy that we picture online, these influencer types that we see all over the place. It's what one social commentator, Andrew Taggart, described as secular monks. These people who are very committed to their way of life, to doing all the right things, but they're just doing all the right things outside of God's goodness and grace. He says that the very pinnacle of this is the proliferation of the morning routine video. Have you guys noticed this? Like in your social media feed, that like everybody wants to share their morning routine with you? Like there's all these guys on my Instagram and Facebook scroll or YouTube that they're like talking about their morning routine. They just have this video of them. And it's the same video over and over and over again. You see a man generally, or at least I do on my videos. I don't know. Maybe your algorithm's different than mine. There's a man who's handsome and well-built, perceivably well-off. We see him wake up. We see him meditate. We see him write in his journal. We see him take his very complex supplement routine. We see him get a workout in. We see him cold plunge. And we see him sit down at a computer to do some very important work that makes lots of money, though we don't know what it is. But what Taggart points out is the thing that's missing from all of these morning routine videos is anyone else. That it's just one person. There isn't a spouse, there isn't a family. And so all of us have this thing in our mind where we're like, yeah, that would be cool. Except these secular monks live in this way by themselves, for themselves. It's about themselves. And I imagine this elder son is that same sort of person. He comes back near the house and he hears music and dancing, which when you can hear dancing going on, you know that they're deep into the party, right? This is like at the wedding when they've gone through all the formal dances and now they're playing the Cupid Shuffle. And everybody's like, oh, I can do this one. Cha-cha slide. As long as there's instructions, I can dance. You can hear the dancing as he comes close. What's going on? What's going on? The slave replies to him, hey, your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he's got him back safe and sound. And when the father received the son home, you remember last week, he received him home, and his heart was filled with compassion. But the older brother, verse 28 says, then he became angry and refused to go in. So his father comes out to him. His father comes out and began to plead with him. I think it's fascinating that the dad in the story runs to the prodigal son, runs to the younger son who's been off in the distant land, who's covered in pig slop. He runs and embraces him. And the older son who's been there the whole time, who's been doing all the right things, who's been doing all the right stuff, who's been saving every single penny that he has, the Father goes to him as well. It's the very nature of the Father to step out to his children, to move towards them time and time again. This older brother has been lost in plain sight, lost in his own self-righteousness, his own inattentional blindness to his own selfishness. That this brother has come home and he can't even celebrate because he's so angry about the way that he behaved or what he did. He can't even go in and celebrate something good. And so the host of the party is drawn away from the party to deal with someone who should be at the party. Let me pause here for a second just to remind you who Jesus is telling these stories to. Jesus is telling this is a parable. It's a story that Jesus is making up to explain something to a group of people. And there with Jesus are sinners and tax collectors, the people who'd be like, yeah, we're the younger son. And scribes and Pharisees, who up until this point are like, oh, Jesus, why are you eating with these people? Why are you hanging out with these people? Why are you spending time with these people? And hopefully at some point it clicks for those scribes and Pharisees, oh, we're in this story too. All of those religious people who have done it all right, who have trusted in their own self-righteousness, who have lived in a certain way, trying to prove to God that they're good enough as opposed to allowing God to make them good. People like you and like me. Father comes out to the younger son. The younger son responds in this way. Listen, for all these years, I've been working like a slave for you. I've been working like a slave for you. And I've never disobeyed your commands, not even once. I've kept all the law, I've kept it all right, I've done it all right, I've done all the right things, and yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. Everything is in relationship to him. He complains that all of these years I've been working for you like a slave. It's fascinating because the younger brother goes away, squanders everything, and says, I'll just go back and be a servant in my dad's house. And when he comes back to say he wants to be a servant, the dad calls him a son, but the son who never left feels like a servant because he's never gotten outside of himself to see the father's perspective. And so he wants everybody to know how good he is. He wants everybody to know how hard he's worked. He wants everybody to know what he's sacrificed for this family. Martin Luther King Jr., whose legacy we celebrate this weekend, talked about this idea of self-righteousness sometimes. He said this, that a person who constantly calls attention to his own trials and sufferings is in danger of developing a martyr complex and of making others feel that he is consciously seeking sympathy. And it's possible for one to be self-centered in his self-denial and self-righteous in his self-sacrifice. So I'm always reluctant to refer to my own personal sacrifices. This older brother is so self-righteous that he can't even see what he's saying. He doesn't even realize that he's self-righteous in his own self-sacrifice. He feels like he's got to do everything by himself, for himself. He's got to prove to everybody that he is his own self-made man. Some of the trap that we so often fall into, especially as people of faith. Like we get outside of God's grace and And we start thinking, well, I've got to do this, and I've got to show this, and I've got to get it all right. And if I do more right things than wrong things, then everything's good. And I've kept all the commands, and I've done it all right, and I've done all these things, and on and on and on. And we never really experienced the goodness and grace of God's love in our lives. And because of that, self-righteous people have a tough time extending grace because they don't feel like they are in need of grace because they can do it themselves. You never gave me anything, Dad. You never gave me anything. Though, if we remember back to the beginning of the story, when the younger son comes to the dad and says, hey, Dad, I'd like my share of the inheritance, the dad divides the estate and gives it to both of his sons. He's already been given all that he's going to get. It's a free gift to him. Here is everything for you to enjoy in the way that you think is appropriate. But he can't see outside of his own selfish desires, his own self-centeredness. When you're self-righteous, you think of everything in relationship to yourself first. And when everything's about yourself, you'll always find yourself by yourself. And so he distances himself from the father and the family. We hear it in words here. When this son of yours comes home, in verse 30, that's what he says. When this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. To which the dad was probably like, oh yeah, about that. I'm sorry, that was your calf actually, because I already gave that to you. Everything's yours. But we needed it because you weren't using it. You never used it. He distances himself and begins to describe his brother's behavior. The guy kept receipts, right? He's like, hey, you devoured your property with prostitutes. I mean, like, he goes one step further. Like, he's like, this is his gotcha moment. Oh, I'm going to get him. I'm going to show my dad how good I am in relation to him. It's that I told you so face that you get. Does anybody get an I told you so face? Evidently, I've been told that I get an I told you so face. And sometimes, in our own desire to be right, we can write people right out of our lives. We can find ourselves being so self-righteous, so self-centered, so self-focused that we can write people right out of our lives. If we have to be right all the time, nobody wants to be around that person. Nobody wants to be around a self-righteous person. Nobody says, you know who I really want to hang out with? That person who only sees themselves. And we can write people right out of our lives. And honestly, lots of us can identify with the older son. I can identify with the older son. I love to be right. And I love for the people closest to me to know when I'm right. We look around sometimes and like the older son, we think, I'm not going to the party with my little brother. I'm not going to the party with those people. Whoever those people are. And this becomes a problem for us, especially in church cultures. Because nobody wants to hang out with people who are judgmental and self-righteous and who don't want to celebrate the grace that they've found. Because here's what happens when we're self-righteous. Like, our self-righteousness tends to lead to self-centeredness. And self-centeredness tends to lead to self-sufficiency. I can do this on my own. We begin to forget that we are all in need of God's grace, and we think, I've got this. I've got this covered. I can do all the things. I can do all the right things. I don't really need God's grace. We begin to forget that we've all been given God's grace, that we've all been given an inheritance. So we become self-sufficient, and as we become self-sufficient, we become a little bit isolated from others because we don't want to be around others who don't get it as much as we get it. I mean, we get it. We know. We got all the right answers. We know all the right stuff. I think this is why our culture feels so very separated right now. Because I'm watching people brush their teeth correctly in their morning routine. You talk about self-isolation. And self-isolation, turns out, leads to more self-righteousness. Because I don't have anybody else to tell me that's not normal. That's not okay. And our culture becomes more and more fragmented and isolated. That's why one author I read recently described the 21st century as the antisocial century. Because we're so self-righteous and self-centered and self-sufficient that we become self-isolated. And the truth is, we need people. We need people in our lives. And not just people who think like us, and not just people who look like us, and not just people who celebrate like us, and not just people who have had the same life experiences as us. We need people. We need lots of different people in our lives. We need to find our people. And we can find our people in a place like this. We can find people who can speak into our lives. We need us. Because the cure for self-righteousness, self-centeredness, all of those selves, the cure for self, it turns out, is others. God gave us other people. In the garden, the very beginning, God made man, and he said it's not good for him to be alone. He'll make weird videos about his morning routine. And then other weird guys who are all by themselves, sitting in their room, will watch those videos. It's not good for them to be alone. We need other people. We need us. We need people who can invite us to see the wholeness of the Father's love and grace. Because otherwise we'll never experience the fullness of it. Because in the Father's house there are no those people. Because we are all those people. Those people that the Father goes out to. Those people that the Father extends an invitation to. Those people that the Father wraps his arm around. Those people that the Father calls sons and daughters. And the Son, who's been doing everything for the Father's love as opposed to from the Father's love for all these years, doesn't understand what the Father says to him next. The Father said to him, "Son, you were always with me, and all that is mine is yours. I already gave it to you. You have all the grace you need." But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. But you were just so focused on doing it yourself that you never experienced it for yourself. You never experienced the goodness of God's grace and love and the celebration that comes with experiencing that grace and love because you were so committed to doing it yourself instead of trusting in the Father's goodness. Paul talks about it in Ephesians chapter 2 in this way. He says this in Ephesians 2, 8 and 9. "For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing." You didn't do this. It is the gift of God. The gift of God. Not the result of works, so that no one can boast. The Father says, we had to celebrate because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and is now found. And then Jesus stops the story. It ends rather abruptly. Jesus doesn't say, and the older brother went inside and toasted to his younger brother, and they embraced, and it was a beautiful moment. Because the story wasn't really about the younger brother. The story is really about the older brother. And Jesus stops right there and looks at these scribes and Pharisees, these very religious people, these very good church-going people who trust in their own self-righteousness, and just lets the story hang with the question in the air, are you going to come to the Father's house? Are you going to find the people that you need? Because we all need people to help us live fully into God's grace, to help us know what that looks like. We all need people to help us know when we're not doing it right, when we're getting a little bit self-centered and self-isolated and self-righteous. We need those people. We need to come to the party. So you're going to go in the house. The question hangs for us just as much. Because we need us. In this new year, we all need to find our people so that we're not stuck in our own self-righteousness. So that we're not stuck only thinking about ourselves. It's not good for us to be alone. We'll think we have all the answers.